The year is 2014. I popped in The Last of Us Remastered, and I still remember that ending. You are left by the end sequence saying, is Joel the villain, and why do I find him so compelling? So that's where we want to dive in today and talk about villains. What makes them so good, and how can we make our own once we deconstruct them? Alfred Hitchcock has famously said, the more successful the villain, the more successful the picture. We have 4 different categories that really break down what makes a good villain and how we can characterize them to better understand them.
Part of writing a great villain to me is knowing what you want your villain to achieve in your story. And these 4 types are 4 different types of stories that you can write for these villains and great starting points for the different kind of story that you want to write. For example, the first one of these we like to call the mirror villain, which is a villain who is exceptionally similar to your protagonist, except for a few key differences that pit them against each other. These stories are really great for diving into a topic or some kind of theme, usually primarily whatever is causing these 2 characters to butt heads. A great example of these are Luke and Darth Vader, Moriarty and Sherlock, Shao Tucker and Edward, and Azula and Zuko. All of these characters have huge amounts of similarities, and a lot of the narrative shows their similarities. With Shao Tucker and Edward, these are both characters that are lustful for knowledge, but one of them has a sense of internal morality and the other doesn't. And it pits them against each other in this horrific scene where Edward realizes how close he is to Shao Tucker, and if he slips on his morality, he could very easily become this person. Now, good stories will usually push the hero to make this difficult decision that could result in them becoming the villain. And if it's a tragedy, the hero will fail this test and they will become like the villain. If it's a typical hero's journey, they will succeed this difficult challenge and show that they are better than the villain, usually at the cost of the villain dying.
The second type is the empathetic villain. This is great for tragedies. Think Thanos from the Avengers. You have a certain idea of them, and by the end point, you're asking if we have the right to judge them or not. You can see this as well with the recent Clair Obscur Expedition 33, Renoir. He seems like someone who just wants to cause chaos and stop the protagonist from achieving their goal. But later you find out that it's a lot deeper than that. You also see this with Gollum. This is one of my favorite examples of an empathetic villain because Gollum at first glance doesn't seem like a villain. He's definitely an antagonist in the truest sense when you compare him to Frodo. He serves as a stark contrast to what Frodo could be when they succumb to something like power because it promises things that probably will never materialize, and Gollum is proof of that, because the addiction he has to this ring doesn't really give him anything but pain and suffering. And so that is what makes him so relatable, because as an audience, as a reader, as a viewer, you can see him and you say, oh my goodness, like I can see myself in that position, just in the generalities of falling prey to something like addiction.
So those first 2 types, the mirror type and the empathetic type, are both at their core require the audience to be sympathetic for the villain. Now, not every villain is like that. Some of the best villains in media are not sympathetic in any way. This third type we call the eccentric villain. They're usually fun villains that are a joy to hate. They're eccentric, interesting, but not particularly empathetic. We're just enthralled by their uniqueness and oddness. Some examples: Yzma from Emperor's New Groove, Frau Engel from Wolfenstein, GLaDOS from Portal, Joker from Batman, Hannibal from Silence of the Lambs. Empathy and motive are something that people talk about all the time when you're writing compelling characters, but these eccentric villains usually don't even have this. And if they do have it, it's wildly unsympathetic. Like with Yzma, where she just wants to be queen so she can be queen. This, to me, shows that you don't necessarily need to start a villain in the way that you would start most characters. If the characters are fun to watch and a joy to read, and they're proactive, proactivity is the basis of a lot of this fun. They are not reactive to everything the main character is doing. They're doing things, even if they're horribly brutal things.
The last type is the monster villain. These are villains that you also are not going to empathize with typically. They're more of a force of nature, or there's almost this inevitability to them. And so in that sense, they have this terror or fear surrounding them. But again, there's not necessarily a backstory to them to where you could then empathize and see where they're coming from. Like a good example here is Sauron. You know, on another level from Gollum, he's completely different in that he is such a force that when you look at some of the main characters that are humans, because Sauron is more on that god tier level within Middle Earth, Frodo seems helpless. There's just no way that he could possibly defeat something this strong. Another example is the shark from Jaws, Pennywise from It, Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men. Anton's an interesting example because he is a person, he's a human, and he's never really given a true motive. He is just there to cause chaos and be this force that causes the protagonist to really question their existence, their reality of why they do what they do. And so in that sense, Anton is such a powerful antagonist to the story as a whole and the world that the characters are living in.
Now that we've jumped into the main types that we like to talk about, now we can start diving into actually how to put these into practice. The first tip that I would say is that you need to make sure that your villain, in most cases, is present throughout the story. Now, for most narrative reasons, you can't necessarily show their POV unless that's going to be the type of story that you want, but their effects should almost always be visible. The villain should get small wins throughout the narrative, and then usually some kind of big win near the end of Act 2 in the story. There's a reason that in the hero's journey, near the end, they have like the literal or metaphysical death, and this is usually to represent the villain having a big win or the point of no return. This is a great moment for many narratives to show the lethality of your villain and that your protagonist could potentially lose if they don't get their stuff together. If you don't do this, something that could happen is like the Mandarin from Iron Man 3, where you think you know who the villain is, and then at the end it's like, oh no, it was me the whole time. Part of the weakness of the Mandarin is not having the correct presence and the correct time in your narrative to show how dangerous they are.
Jesse, you mentioned that villains should make their presence known, and that reminded me of some very famous villains, like I mentioned Sauron before, and even Voldemort. These characters are so cool because even if they're not on the screen or page, you can feel their presence. And if you're trying to create an effective villain, you can ask yourself, if I take the villain out of the world they're inhabiting, do things change? Sauron obviously has a huge effect, and same with Voldemort. Everyone talks about Voldemort and they're terrified of him, yet you don't see him until the 4th book. But it's just so cool to think about what is the villain going to be doing to the world itself, not just one or two characters. And I would also say, this is something that I did in my own writing, was to find your protagonist and your antagonist and then build the world around them. Find those two characters and then build out what you want to say from that point. And that keeps the story built around your characters and built around this conflict of potentially good and evil. If you want good to win or evil to win, what are you trying to say with that? And so then at the end, when it comes to what moral statement are you trying to say? These are all just good questions to ask yourself when you're trying to flesh out, what is a villain? What do I want to say with this villain? And yeah, what do I want to accomplish with them?
Now, these types and this advice might seem really restrictive, especially to our discovery writers out there, but remember that there is an incredible amount of variance even within these categories. And these categories are not the end all be all. Some of these villains even fit into multiple things. The Joker is a great example of someone who's an eccentric villain, but also is a mirror of Batman himself. I would highly recommend, if you want to create a villain, don't try to stick so closely to what is typical when it comes to villains. Not every villain is Sauron in dark plated armor sitting on the top of his tower. There's a quote by C.S. Lewis that says, "The greatest evil is not now done in those sordid dens of crime, but in clean, carpeted, warmed, and well-lighted offices." Some of the best villains are just taking something that is really good and pushing it to its absolute limit and twisting it into creepy evil. For example, you could take something even as innocent as like love and affection and twist it into a character like Annie Wilkes where it becomes possessive. You could take a concept like order and justice and have a character like Frau Engel from Wolfenstein. Sometimes creating a villain is just taking something, some innocent concept, maybe something even that your protagonist has, and pushing it to its absolute limit.
Oftentimes, I think we feel forced to give backstories to villains, I think because of these empathetic ones that are dominating the scene recently. You don't always have to do that. I think agency is far more important or superior than backstory. Making clear their worldview, making clear these places that you're taking them is going to be so effective when you're making a villain and making an effective mirror to the moral statement that you're creating. Well, I hope we covered the bases for villains, and that does not cover all the bases, surely. There's plenty of other ones that are going to be really probably compelling and good. Let us know which ones are good and which ones we may have missed so that we can further dive into this topic ourselves and allow us to flesh out our own villains as we're creating stories as well. Yeah, we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Hey guys, if you really like this video, check the one down below. You might like that one too.
And if you really like what you see, click here to subscribe.